as a brand, and I know we're celebrating because obviously we are in love with the brand, but and if you're listening, you must be in love as well, or hopefully you are, or you're getting yourself educated. But it really is, it's a community, and I think every once in a while, I don't want to touch on it too much, but you meet somebody who maybe has a stereotype or a stigma about the brand, right? Like those guys are, all the sayings that go along with Porsche, and they're like, but they don't know the actual history. They don't know the relationships. They don't know. They just know what they've heard from other people. Yeah. And I think one of the things what we're doing is we're trying to break down those barriers, right? Like, and we're showing people that it's actually a real community.
It's very approachable.
It's not one of those things where people think that, oh, well, I can't talk to you because you have a Porsche. And it's like, it's the exact opposite. And we've been telling people that for a long time. And I think it's starting to, maybe people are starting to figure that out. Do you kind of agree to that?
Absolutely. We were having a conversation with another fellow this morning as we were walking through the Heritage Gallery, and there you have the 914 exhibit, 50th anniversary of the 914. And on the other side of the hall, you have the Carrera GT, right? And you just, if you look at the, now the 914 values are starting to come up, but the 914 is a very approachable, collectible car, classic car that if somebody wants to enjoy, you can still go out there and do that. And you look at the 996s and the 986s and the Boxsters and 911s of that era. Look at how the 964 has turned. That changed around. Everything finds its way eventually, it seems like. But
I agree.
What I love about the brand is that when you go to an event like Rennsport, it's all there, right? And you're all welcome. And
and everything's well represented.
Absolutely. And the books that are out there, the magazines that you read and you see, it's usually a really good spread because it's so different. It's the Porsche principle applied to different layouts: front engine, rear transaxle, mid-engine, rear engine, hybrid, gas, electric soon.
Yeah. And I think we talked earlier too, and I think it was a great point that we discussed. If you're an enthusiast of Porsche, you're an enthusiast of all lines, not just one. And I think that describes a real enthusiast. And not saying that to be negative. I'm saying, like, love all of it. Like, because they're all special in their own right. Like, if you look at almost kind of the purpose behind, and you do your history behind this specific car and what it was built to do, and then you start to see, you're like, oh, and now the light bulb goes off, and now you're like, okay, I know why you exist now, and now I know why you exist, and you start to appreciate those things for what we're meant to do.
Right. We did an event out in L.A. recently, after I left Chicago, as a matter of fact, and it was to celebrate the 914 on September 14th.
Yeah.
And the specialists, the people that were there around that model, are so knowledgeable about that. I love the sub-brand element that we have. And then here, we had a 928 event. It wasn't on 928, but it was actually a month or two earlier than that. And I was amazed at the number of people and cars that showed up for the 928.
Yeah.
And upstairs where we did Rare Shades last year, in the same area, we had about 60 928s, and some of the best examples from the 928s that have come from all over to be here.
I think I saw you on a YouTube thing or something like that, talking narrating. Right? That was excellent.
It was amazing, the passion around that model. But you're right; they're like branches off of the Porsche tree, and that's one of the things that I love about the brand is that there's so many ways. I think what you said it earlier. Somebody said to you, "Well, don't you run out of things to talk about just focusing on Porsche?"
Yeah.
That's kind of funny because it's kind of hard to do that.
Exactly.
No, because there's branches in this.
Well, exactly, and there's so many, and then it goes back to stories. There's infinite amount of stories, and I'm talking to all of the listeners out there. You all have Porsche stories, and Aaron and I are always looking for them.
Yeah.
And it's not that you have to carry a big name to have a story. Like, we want to tell everyone's story, and everybody has a unique story. It's like you hear those, and you and I talked about being jealous, of other people's, like Mikhail's story, right? Like
these ownership stories.
And they're like, oh yeah, we found the car when I was 13, and now I'm like 53, and it's like, what?
Still have
you have the car this whole time? Yeah. It's like, oh, I envy that like long, monogamous relationship with that Porsche. Like, why can't I want one of those? I want to be able to. I want to be in that club.
But we go back to like that recommissioned story about the Carrera GT. What attracted you first was seeing it somewhere, and so personally, I have a 911 now, but I would actually really like to have a Boxster at some point as well, because I remember being at the Detroit Auto Show in 1993, not knowing what was under that cover. Was there covering on a press day for a newsletter of all things, and just happened to be there when they pulled the cover off the Boxster for the first time.
Yeah.
And now that was 1993. Now I've owned a 97 and I've had a 99 and other various company cars and what have you since then. But there's a connection there with the Boxster. Now knowing Grant Larson, who's still with the company, designed the car, having had the concept car here inside our Heritage Gallery, and really learning the whole story behind it that way, I feel a certain connection to that model. So even though you have a 911, I guess what I'm saying is there are aspirational models in every single car we've ever built, because what attracted you to it in the first place.
Exactly.
Right? And that, again, I think is really special about the Porsche brand.
And which is kind of crazy, too, because Aaron and I were discussing this because we road tripped on our way up here. And granted, it was mostly interstate, but just in our daily travels, because we daily travel around, and I'm trying to be in tune with what's out on the road. And we were discussing almost kind of late 90s, early 2000, any Porsche, like Boxster, 911, whatever, we're just not seeing a bunch of them. So
we know the productions were high.
Yeah,
so.
We knew there was a lot of them sold. So that, like we talked earlier, is a page turning. Are these starting to turn that page where you better go get them while you can? And or are we going to enter into another phase like we always do with Porsche? I mean, like for the years, like you described 964, nobody wanted it. And then that turned into a thing. Nobody wanted a mid-year 911. Then that turned into a thing. And it's like...
what is it with people and scarcity, right? When it's there, we think, I don't want that. And then as soon as it's you can't have it, I want it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. It's like, oh, I need it now, like, because they don't exist. And it's...
Somebody brought that up. They were like, I think they said... it was like a question on some online thing that I saw that said, when you go through some of these auction sites online and you see these cars pop up that are just like, a random car from when you were a kid, and you see it's like perfect car, low mileage, and it's relatively inexpensive or whatever. You just like all of a sudden think, well, I need to have that. Like, why do I need a Rabbit diesel?
Yeah, exactly.
This has 2,000 miles on it. It's powder blue and
exactly.
It's perfect.
And it's a time capsule. I need it.
Right.
Yeah. So. I gotta have this because maybe I will transform when I drive that car back to that era.
Yeah, the classic car enthusiasm for sure is there, and the cars become more special too as we drive the new cars, which are so good. You get into a car, even the 964 now, when I go and drive that, and you can relate to this, you drive the 997 and then you jump in the 964, it's so different. You're up against the windshield, it's very small and intimate, your arm's right there on the door,
Exactly.
You can reach over to the other side of the car pretty much. Times change, and so they just continue to reinvent themselves as the experience that they give you, because that was true when they were new.
Yes.
But it becomes even more of a differentiator today.
I think so. I think each year it goes by, you get further and further separated away from what that was at that time period, right? And then that becomes more and more nostalgic, I think is what ends up happening.
Almost looking for imperfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the road trip experiences and things we do. I did the rally up in North Carolina recently, and I mean that was absolutely nothing to do with about the speed or the performance of the car. It was just enjoying the feel of the road, that environment, with that unique vehicle around you.
And then the camaraderie it went with it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that, and I think a lot of people, and I think that's another element that we didn't really touch on, that people outside of the brand. I mean, and to be fair, how would you see it? Because you're not part of the brand, or you're just kind of on the outside, you're tap dancing in. You don't necessarily have to be an owner to have that kind of camaraderie. Like, you can come to these events, you can kind of see these people interacting, and you see somebody, maybe I saw you 6 months ago and we're car friends and we don't talk every day, but when I see you 6 months from then, it's like, hey, what's up? What's going on? And you're catching up, and you're looking at each other's cars, and how you been? And I'm great. And how's the car running? And
isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, And
I love the community aspect of it. I really do.
Yeah.
For that point, it's like we talked about in the previous episode where we said, we've kind of created our own holiday get-togethers around different shows.
It is
that we've created.
Exactly.
Different parts of the country.
Yeah. Exactly. It's our way to go visit places with cars.
Yeah.
Is what we've done, right?
That's it.
Yeah.